What is the fractious relationship between Lufthansa management and the German government?
So basically, Carsten Spohr, that runs Lufthansa, Tom, doesn't want the government to be too heavily involved because he's worried that once the crisis passes, if the government is involved, Lufthansa will no longer be competitive because it'll have the government sitting on its board, it'll have the unions heavily involved, there will be a much bigger green agenda involved, and as a result of which, when all of this is at least partially over, he will not be able to compete with the likes of IAG or Ryanair on short-haul flights. However, it looks as if he is going to have to bite the bullet on this one. It looks as if the German government is ultimately going to end up with a 25% stake plus one share. That will give it a blocking majority. It will likely end up with 2 seats on the supervisory board, as a result of which we find ourselves in a situation where Lufthansa is effectively going to be run for the benefit of the German government. And that is a very different proposition, Tom, to running an independent airline. It's going to look more like Emirates than it is like IAG.
Yeah. Well, I like that idea of Emirates, but I was also thinking about CDG and Air France as well. What will be the distinctive structure of a German model at 20-some% versus the French model of peeling back on Air France over the years?
I think basically, Tom, you're going to end up with the same situation with both airlines. The state is going to be heavily involved. And if you talk to somebody like Mark Manduka over at Citi, he's their analyst over there, he thinks you end up in a situation where you basically have 2 camps in Europe. You have the kind of state-run, state-organized airlines, similar to the kind of the operating brief that Emirates has, i.e. you are here to serve the German people, to serve German business, and that is your objective here. It is not to make money in the same way that IAG is designed to make money and Ryanair is designed to make money. And ultimately, the equity ultimately ends up getting diluted down to a stub equity, and these are basically state-run carriers. So a very similar situation he expects over at Air France and at Lufthansa, and a very different situation at the likes of Ryanair and IAG. So kind of Ryanair and IAG came into this with strong balance sheets. Lufthansa and Air France did not. They thought that their unencumbered assets, i.e. their aircraft, would provide liquidity. It hasn't. And as a result of which they've had to go to the state and effectively allow the state to take control of these businesses, Tom.
Guy, what are the chances that the EU actually say yes to this?
I think there's a very high chance that the EU ultimately say yes to this, Francine. I think we are probably going to have to change some of the rules around a little bit, but I would be very surprised if the EU ultimately ended up blocking this. These are 2 of the major airline groups in Europe. They are close to collapse. If they do collapse, there will be thousands of jobs that ultimately will go. Jobs will ultimately probably have to go, despite the fact that the government is involved. Carsten Spohr is talking about Lufthansa being a significantly smaller airline. But I would be very surprised if the Commission decided that it wanted to block this. It just seems that Ursula von der Leyen doesn't have the ability in the same way that her predecessor did to stand up to these big governments. And I think Berlin, once it's made its mind up, will force this one through.